How are we
Hey,
doing?
doing well, doing well. Looking forward to this today.
Yeah, this will be a good one. I'm always excited for these reports that you list out. They're always detailed. They're always fun. Looks like we got a couple people rolling in here. Where is everybody coming in from? This is a famous Ben question that I'm going to steal.
Mhm.
Who do we have from here today? If you wouldn't mind posting where you're coming from in the chat, that would be awesome. Ben, you have changed locations on us. You are in a new part of the
No,
world.
yeah. It looks like Praveen said they can't post. So, well, anyway, we'll kind of
Oh,
feel where
okay.
you're dialing from. I can at least say I used to say I'm dialing in from Denver, Colorado, Centennial, but now moved to Scottsdale, Arizona about 2 months ago. So now living in the desert.
Wow, that is very exciting. Yeah, well, you've changed a little bit of the climate, but nevertheless, the SaaS metrics remain the same. So hopefully today we can have some interesting takeaways from all of this. Ben, can you see my screen here?
Yep, I see the kind of the subject header slide here. Yep.
Oh, beautiful. That's perfect. So everyone, welcome to the SaaS CFO's Finance Tech Stack Report. This is for 2025. Obviously, Ben runs these pretty frequently. We've done this before in the past, and today will just be an updated version of what you've seen in the past, which allows for not only some trend analysis, but also the new insights. For those of you that don't know Ben, Ben's worked in finance and accounting for 25 years. He's been the SaaS CFO for over 9 years. He began his career in the FP&A function, and he offers coaching, fractional CFO services, and of course, the SaaS finance courses that he's so famous for. And so that's Ben. I'm Kirk. I'm the director of strategic finance here at Drivetrain. We're a strategic finance platform, and we're lucky that we get to host this with Ben today. And we'll be going through a couple of things here. Firstly, you can see over on the left, we're going to be breaking down the tools that SaaS companies are using. We'll break it out by the size of the SaaS company, the function of those individual tools. And we're going to be trying to build up what is the correct ideal finance tech stack for maximum impact in your organization. Now, this will change from company to company. And so use this as much as you can, post comments when available, respond to the polls when available. And then, of course, at the end of this, we're always here to for you if you want to reach out, right? You'll see our details here in the chat, whether that's my emails or Ben. Please feel free to reach out to us. But let's get right into it. Let's start with the poll here. We got two poll questions for you. Firstly, how many different tools does your finance team use today? 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 10, right? If you can do more than 10, I'll be impressed. I want to know who you are. And then poll number 2, how important are AI features in your finance tool? Do they impact your evaluation criteria? Might be too recent to even ask this question. Maybe it's not a priority yet, but if it is essential, if it's important, we've seen people on both sides here. So go ahead and answer that. While you're doing that, Ben, question for
Mhm.
you. What started this survey, and what is the research methodology to develop this report?
Yeah, great question. And I love that poll. And actually, I have I have a version 2 of my report to publish as well because I now know kind of like, yeah, how many tools are being used in finance and accounting. So I'd love to, so make sure you answer that poll. I'd love to hear what you guys, how many you're using. And it could be hard off the cuff to know that, but I got anywhere from 12 to 16, Kirk, that finance and accounting are using 12 to 16. So I expect a lot of people to be in that 10 plus category. But I started this is my sixth annual report. I started this, of course, 6 years ago because at my blog at thesaaSCFO.com, I'd have founders, I'd CFOs reach out and be, hey, Ben, what should I use for accounting? What should I use for FP&A? What should I use for this? And I was like, hey, let's poll my audience. And probably at that time, I probably had 40,000 subscribers to my newsletter, now have 80. But I was like, hey, let me pull my audience. What's being used in SaaS companies? And that was the whole point. Let's see what's used. It's not a market map. It's not my opinion of what's being used. So I'd pull my newsletter, my readers, my subscribers, my communities that I've built, and through that survey data, then I could see, okay, what's being used. And then I've run it for 6 years now. And then you could see, all right, because sometimes surveys, there may be faulty data, all this stuff, but you could see trends in the
Mm,
data, that then substantiate the validity of the survey. So that's how I started it.
sure. Well, that's awesome. And so I'm imagining you would pull from that following that you had to create this. How many respondents do we actually have, and have they grown over the years? Has it been about steady?
Yeah, it's actually, I think my first survey had 200 something responses. Now with this one over 600. So each year kind of growing by a couple hundred. So hopefully, big goal next year, hit about 1,000. When I launch the new survey, time goes so fast. I'll launch the new survey in the fourth quarter this year.
Oh, that's huge. And then on those participant basis, how do you screen for them? Like when we're looking at the type of respondents that you're looking at, is there a specific title you're looking for? Is it the size of a company that you're looking for? What decides whether they're included or not?
So of course I look for I ask for the size of company. It's anonymous if they want to enter that, but it really helps understand how the tech changes as your SaaS company scales. And then the big thing for me, it's like, hey, do you know enough about your finance and accounting tech stack? So it's going to
Mm.
be people who are directors, controllers, CFOs, where they kind of know that expanse of the software. And then, I do quality checks. Because sometimes with all these data, these surveys, you get bots in there, you get ballot stuffing, and do a little quality control check on the data just to make sure we don't have kind of any funny business with people trying to like boost their software higher in the survey.
Great point. Well, without further ado, then let's jump into this a little bit here. In terms of the first category, accounting software. Here, is there any preliminary comments you want to have before we jump into this?
Man, it's been the same year in, year out for 5 years. Now, when we show the slide, you'll see it has actually changed. So there's some new players who knew in the accounting space.
Well, let's jump into it. Tell us here, Ben. Give us your thoughts on the overview, but then in general, I'd love to know what's changed the past few years, and then is this consistent with what you've expected, or have there been any surprises? I'm guessing there's a yes to both of those, but I'll
Yeah.
hand over to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So guys, so what you see here, year in, year out, it's been QuickBooks, Xero, Sage, NetSuite, and just maybe a little jockeying for position. Now, what I'm seeing in the changes is QuickBooks, and Xero starting to lose a little bit of market share. And this year, big shocker, two new entrants to the chart that we have Rillet and Campfire. Now, Rillet is SaaS focused. They're built to handle accounting for SaaS companies. Campfire, I think, is a little bit more agnostic. I've talked to both of those founders, our co-founders. So that's the big change here. We actually have new entrants into accounting, which you think, hey, accounting isn't that sexy, kind of sleepy space. But yeah, look at this. And even, in the other category, there are a lot of other solutions. So we'll see. So usually I try to list at least maybe 5 to 8 of the top players that you need to be aware of that's being used in SaaS companies. And I've even talked to Workday, and Workday is trying to now push more into SaaS and more into the lower levels versus, big Fortune 500 companies.
Wow. Yeah, that is super interesting. I'm wondering how much AI plays an impact on that new entrant market, or if it's just an industry specific thing. Like you mentioned, Rillet from an industry perspective.
Mhm.
Campfire doesn't seem to be, associated with anything in particular, just as a general tool, right? Any thoughts on that AI and these new entrants or anything?
Well, you're seeing, I think, accounting now, right? That these are not, of course, accounting, I don't think like now can't be like AI, like it was built purpose for AI,
Mm,
where now these tools are integrating AI into their process versus other categories. Yeah, you have new entrants and they're built to be an AI company, and we're not just adding an AI feature into our tool set.
got it. All right, well, let's jump on here. This is a slightly different breakdown, this time by ARR size. Any thoughts or takeaways from this based on those trends you were mentioning before?
Yeah, and Praveen posted our thing like, hey, if you guys have any Q&A, just post that I think in the Q&A box, and we'll take that as we go. Love to take some questions here, but ARR size. So this is a big thing. So you can see, let me change my zoom here. I'm not seeing kind of the color codes here, but really you see QuickBooks dominate at these lower AR levels. Oh, there we go. Maybe it was on my side. And then you see as we hit that 10, 11 million AR threshold, now the ERP players come into play. So you've got Sage, NetSuite, QuickBooks still there, but starts dropping off. So 10 million ARR definitely seems to be that line of demarcation where we're moving from QuickBooks Zero now to either a Sage and NetSuite or maybe a Rillet or a Campfire.
So is that sort of the general time frame you would recommend as well? because we're seeing that shifted around 5 to 10 million, is that too late, or is that just in the nick of time, or too early? Like, what would you recommend based on your experience?
Well, I think the earlier, the easier. I've done transitions from, say, Dynamics and QuickBooks and all these
Mm,
into, an ERP application, and it just gets harder. The more data, it's a big data transformation exercise, really, with switching accounting systems, and it's not a lot of fun. It takes a long time. So I think if you're 5 to 10 million and you see like, hey, we've got a path, to 15 to 20 to 30 million, it's time to
sure.
consider like, yeah, do we run with QuickBooks and do a lot of point solutions? Or should we jump to a Sage and NetSuite, Rillet, and ride them as my ERP? But it does get harder, I think, the bigger you get.
Got it. And besides ARR size, are there any other factors that you would consider when deciding, when's the right time to transition to a bigger tool? What tool should I choose in the first place?
Yeah, I think, and we'll see some of these slides like invoicing. What's our invoicing complexity? If we're just sending
Mm,
a bunch of annual invoices, we've got 50 enterprise customers. Yeah, QuickBooks can do that. Uh,
mm,
but if we've got some usage, we've got different revenue streams, we've got annual and monthly, and we've got to do RevRec, then okay, now things are getting a bit more complex. So can the native functionality in a QuickBooks, and I'm not picking on QuickBooks, but they're ubiquitous, but
mm.
just can that handle our complexity? Can it handle renewal management, subscription management? In most cases, at some point, it'll be a manual process, and we either need a point solution or we need to switch to an ERP.
Sure. How many classes can we add before we decide it's time to upgrade
Yeah,
from QuickBooks,
yeah,
let's just say?
yeah, exactly.
So invoicing software here, you briefly mentioned this. Any big takeaways from this one?
So what you see here now, as expected, we have accounting solutions who are handling the invoicing. You have ERP, you've got SMB like QuickBooks, but now Stripe, right? Of course, a lot of people invoice out of Stripe on the B2B and B2C side. Then you've got Maxio, ChargeBee, Unium, where they're more subscription management. So now you've got a mix of either, hey, I'm just going to do it in my ERP, or I'm going to hook up a Maxio, a ChargeBee, a Unium to QuickBooks or Zero and scale that way. But invoicing is a big deal, right? We've got to be able to invoice the right way, invoice how we set up our products, how we gate our products. So that's a big one in CFO's product roadmap.
Got it. Now, I'm wondering, is there a right time to think about moving from like ERP invoicing to a tool-specific invoicing software? Like, is there an invoice count amount per accounting FTE, or is it just an ARR amount? Do you think of it that way, or is there another way entirely?
I think it's really like even you see some I've seen in my survey that you have people hooking up invoicing solutions to Sage and NetSuite because maybe this other one is very hey, I'm just a usage-based company and this tool does a great job. That's their core functionality. So I don't think it's necessarily like employee counts, maybe not even AR size, but I think it just gets to the complexity and well, volume of invoicing. If we're just sending
Got it.
10 enterprise invoices out a month, no big deal. But if we're sending 100 and now I've got to renew 100 customers and now I've got expansion deals coming in, changing contracts, contract mods, then the complexity, right? We don't want to just add a bunch more staff to our accounting team to handle that. Now we need tech to help.
Got it. Now we do have our first question here, Ben, from Melanie. She
Mhm.
says, we're a small startup right now with QuickBooks. Do we move to something like Sage and then to NetSuite, or do we move
Mhm.
straight to NetSuite?
Hey, Melanie, great question. So I would like nothing again, I try to stay agnostic, but that's what I get a lot is like, hey, we should just move to NetSuite. And you'll hear like Campfire and Rillet and these others say, hey, that's kind of that used to be the way to think. And now we've got so many solutions, better solutions out there that you probably Sage and NetSuite are ERP. So you wouldn't go to Sage and then to NetSuite. You'd pick one or the other, because both of those are ERP. So you'd have to pick one or the other, and now, or do you use a point solution to extend the runway of QuickBooks?
Good question. Good answer. Definitely keep them coming, guys. Let's jump on to the next one, revenue recognition software. How much does ASC 606 come into play here? So Ben, any high level takeaways before we inevitably get into the controversy of RevRec?
Yeah, so you'll see spreadsheets again, like a lot of categories dominated by spreadsheets. And usually, like I did at RevRec, you start with spreadsheets, then you do need a tool. We don't want to do RevRec and spreadsheets forever. But then, RevRec is so important to recurring revenue businesses. Again, an ERP can handle it, RevRec modules in Sage, in NetSuite, Rillet, but then others are handling RevRec as well. Maxio, these subscription management platforms. So again, you see overlap between invoicing and RevRec that kind of roll up to overall subscription management. But this is so important, the flow of invoice data into our RevRec engine, whether that's in our ERP or the flow of invoice data, within a subscription management system. So yeah, this one is definitely a must-have, and usually I recommend companies kind of in that 3 to 5 million range in ARR and scaling. It's time to think about full accrual accounting and RevRec.
Okay. So three questions off of this. You can take them any order you like.
Mhm.
One, why is that 3 to 5 million range so important to start thinking about RevRec? Two, why are spreadsheets, particularly in this category, so dominant relative to others? And then three, what does the NA represent here? Maybe are they not doing RevRec at all?
Yeah. Yeah, so 3 to 5 million. So I help a lot of SaaS companies on a fractional basis, and
Mm,
that's where usually we're seeing enough volume of data in the business. We're scaling, and where we have to understand the true economics. We can no longer manage the business on a cash basis. We have to understand gross profit on an accrual basis. We have to feed all this data into our SaaS metrics. We can't have all this annual invoicing happen in January and then we don't invoice in February. We can't manage our business that way because it's scaling. So we need to understand it more on that accrual economic basis. Uh,
sure.
and then, and then NA is just, yeah, they're not doing it. It's just, and that's common. We're just not doing RevRec, and we'll do it when someone tells us to do it. And I forgot what was the other question?
Just on spreadsheets, right? It seems to
Oh,
be particularly dominant in this category. Is that just truly because it's so complex? Like I feel like there's things out there to handle it. Why do you think people keep kind of magnetizing or
yeah.
gravitating towards it?
Well, you'll see in a lot of the software categories in my report, spreadsheets still dominate, right? We always start in spreadsheets.
Mm,
Our forecasting, right? FP&A, we're going to have our forecast model and then push it into software. So no different here where, a lot of companies, they're like, oh, we always invoice monthly. Now we're introducing annual invoices. All right, let me just set up a basic spreadsheet process, which is fine because we want to put RevRec in place. But again, that's one of those don't linger in spreadsheets. You just have to move this into software, especially to make your audit life easier, pass audit, pass due diligence. Just so important.
got it. All right, let's jump on to that one you just mentioned there, FP&A software. Here we've got an array of items. I know there's been some shifting pieces here. Any thoughts or takeaways at a high level that kind of surprised you this year on this?
No, so spreadsheets again, we know, especially me, I grew up in Office and Excel, came up the ranks of FP&A, and you just start out in spreadsheets. And even I've been like, it was director of finance at a billion-dollar regional airline, and they were using spreadsheets to forecast and all these connected spreadsheets. It took forever to update, and then I moved them over to an FP&A solution, and it's a night and day change. So again, one of those things eventually, and usually I'd say above 10 million, it could be less, where this is going to make your life so much easier. Even just pulling
Sure.
actuals into an FP&A type solution is going to make things easier. So FP&A, a lot of tools out there, very competitive. There's a little bit of jockeying here, but again, you see Drivetrain and some of the other tools here. And really for me, this is a must-have at some point. It makes your life so much easier in FP&A as a CFO, and especially if you are acquired by PE, in all the reporting analysis that they want to do, you'll pull your hair out doing this in spreadsheets.
Without a doubt. Now, I'm interested. We talked a bit about the AI before. Have you seen any impact of AI on the FP&A software category, in the last, let's say, 12 months when it's really been ramping?
I think FAI is still pretty slow going into the finance and accounting function, especially
Mm,
accounting, because we have no leeway for error there.
sure.
FP&A, I think, yes, where we can maybe start doing some data analysis or help us with data analysis, asking questions, pulling reports, pulling data. So definitely more on the FP&A side. Accounting, right? It's still going to take some time, but definitely for forecasting, planning data analysis, seeing more there.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, we have here at DriveTrain put a little bit of effort into it. One thing that we do have and we've created here are these AI generated models. And the reason I say AI generated models instead of your more traditional templates is because templates are standardized despite the system you're pulling from, despite the level of complexity that you have bringing in. Whereas what we've developed here is a model that it will adapt to your level of granularity, whether you have 6 classes or 3 levels of granularity to your chart of accounts, right? The model will respond to that and have those sort of indentations or ribbons intact as well, where you're going to be forecasting at one level or another based on what you're integrating, right? Which will kind of pick up from that. So that's one piece. Again, if you guys are interested in learning more about that, like please feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to show you more about that. Now
And
let's
then
get
Kirk,
into.
I was gonna
Oh yeah,
say
go
there are
ahead, Ben.
a couple questions FP&A related. I don't know if you wanted to take those now.
Oh yeah, let's do it. What are you seeing? Yeah, I see them here. How do you decide on a budget for a new tool? That's a good one.
Oh, Wayne, yeah, that's a great question because budgets vary, from $100 a month to 50,000 a year or more. And I think it depends. Like, are I find some tools are built for, say, that small business or the founder to operate, pretty simple, straightforward. But I found as a CFO needed a little bit more complexity. So that's going to drive cost too, going to drive implementation. So it just depends. Like Wayne, are you a CFO? What's your function? Are you a founder? And that kind of dictates. But yeah, you're gonna spend, if I was a CFO looking for a tool, yeah, you're gonna spend 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe more. It just depends again, team size, seats, all that stuff. Um, for that. And, so it does vary versus if you're like, hey, I just want some self-service product. I sign up today and I input some data, right? It's just gonna be, for me, not as complex, but maybe for a small business, founder-led business, that might be okay.
That's a good one. And I think if I jump back to this, I've got one on this from Preeti. For this FP&A, what is the sample size of companies for this pie chart? Also, what is the ARR size for the sample set?
Yeah, so this again, all pretty much every category had over 600 responses. So you have 600 responses in this. And then I don't know if we're showing it, today, but I do, and that's where if you download my tech stack report, pretty, and you'll see all these categories by ARR size. So you'll see like spreadsheets dominate early, and then people start moving into solutions. So you can see this by ARR size as well.
That's great. Yeah, definitely keep the questions coming, guys. So SaaS metrics, get a little bit industry specific here on the reporting software. Here, this is your area of expertise, Ben. What are you seeing as kind of the main drivers here, main changes? What jumps out at you?
Yeah, so this SaaS metrics, right? It's still the Wild West of reporting here because one takeaway, we have a lot of solutions trying to solve this, meaning, of course, spreadsheets, analytic tools like Power BI, ERP like Sage, FP&A planning solutions like DriveTrain, accounting software. So it's, subscription management software too. So you have different types of software trying to solve this. And even they didn't show up on the report here, but so that's like, okay, what are we expecting out of our solution? Do we want the solution to calculate the metrics, or do we want a solution like a Power BI that's really just presenting it? And maybe we're calculating the metrics in a Google Sheet or a spreadsheet and then just delivering the final result to a Power BI, for example. So that's the question here. And that's why it's so hard because you need the 4 key SaaS finance data sources to calculate the entire set of SaaS metrics from my 5-pillar SaaS metrics framework. So again, expectations of the solution are, and some of these are more revenue type solutions where maybe it's going to give you a bunch of revenue SaaS metrics, but not anything related to expense. So again, what's the expectation of the solution that you're purchasing for this category?
Yeah, one thing that always strikes me with the SaaS metrics piece is the need for flexibility. You mentioned yourself, you said wild, wild west. I think what we'll see a lot of the time is someone will want to come in and do something as common as CAC, right? And for a lot of companies, that's simply sales and marketing expense from period X over new customers from period X. But a lot of our customers say, well, that's not really, that's not applicable to us because it's really sales and marketing from 90 days ago because that's how long our lead time is. That leads to sales, that leads to new customers today, right? So that flexibility, I think that's super important because, as we know, there's no gap SaaS metrics yet. So I'm interested on that flexibility piece. Have you seen any challenges with that? Is there a specific, way to go? Is it spreadsheets? Is it, you give up altogether on the SaaS metrics? What do you do on all this?
So I posted a LinkedIn post that was got quite a few comments, and it was about do it spreadsheets first and then software. So my process for my fractional clients, we're building out in spreadsheets. We're taking all the raw data, we're going down to the raw data, we're calculating it by hand in spreadsheets to figure out what should be the right answer. How should we calculate these? And then, like you said, what's that period of measurement? Should we use a trailing 6, trailing 12, trailing 3? So let's make sure we prove out the data, get the calculations right, and we validate the metrics and the output. And then, all right, what software should we use to then repeat the process and do this on an automated basis? Because a lot of solutions, unfortunately, they're a bit of a black box as far as how they're
Mm,
calculating it. So sometimes, and I won't name the solutions, but sometimes even if we're using a solution that can produce some numbers or metrics, I'm still pulling the raw data out of there, calculating myself, and then okay, it's up to that SaaS company. Now, do we want to move this process into software that can replicate how we think the metrics should be calculated?
got you. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. So I got another one here. Our Power BI and drivetrain competitors. We are certainly not. We integrate with Power BI. Most of our customers who are Power BI users will do that. One thing you'll know about BI tools in particular is they're great at housing historical data. You bring in data, you can transpose it, you can pivot between it, and the visuals are stunning. But that's only historicals. Drivetrains and FP&A software. So you might integrate that historical data, but you're also going to want to do some BI on the forecasting piece. So while we also have a BI tool within Drivetrain that allows you to do all that reporting and forecasting, right? The Power BI is a contributor to that, certainly not a competitor to that. They're dealing with slightly different problems there. Good question. So Ben, asterisks before we jump on to the next category here.
Yeah, and there's just a comment from John. CAC is whatever the CEO wants it to be, so pretty much a worthless metric. Well, of course, I disagree. You can only get away with that for so long. So if internally we're kind of playing with that number, like if you go to third parties, if you go to due diligence, anything, people are going to discover that. So that can only last so long.
Yeah, I had an interesting case once where a customer wanted to calculate any new customers that came in as new, right? New, or maybe even depending on how they were calculated, expansion. But if they left in the first 3 months, they didn't want to calculate it as churn. And that's because they had a 3-month trial period. And I said, well, these are reverses. If you calculate +1 and 1, if they revert, you have to calculate it as -1. And they didn't want to. And sure enough, cash tells the story. And so they found it all in
Yeah.
cash later, what was missing. So yeah, there it is a Wild West, but someone's going to catch you.
Yeah.
So just here, I just want a quick voiceover on this. This is on that BI piece that we were talking about before. This would be something equivalent to the Power BI abilities that we were talking about, but now you've got your forecast built in here. So you'll notice a couple of different things here. You'll notice the total ARR, and that's got a number, and it's versus your plan. Right? This is a piece that Power BI might miss. On the bottom here, you've got sort of the breakout of ARR by market segment, these sorts of things. And then ARR by scenarios, you can see that obviously implies a future high case, a base case, a low case. Those sorts of things are the addition to Power BI that you would gather. And so obviously within Drivetrain, you're going to bring in your actuals, aggregate that across however many systems you have, forecast on top of that, then do a BI equivalent between the two. You'll see here we've got a quick poll. Are you interested in a demo of Drivetrain? If you are, let us know. If it's not right now, no problem at all. Just interested in your thoughts and seeing that. So let's jump onto sales tax software here. This is getting more and more specific as we look at this. This is a little bit more spread out, right? We see a couple of fewer competitors than we've seen before in these other categories. Some new entrants on this particular slide. Any thoughts here, Ben?
Yeah, so this is a category interesting. Like years ago, it's like, whatever. Like no one wants to know this. And a lot of SaaS founders I find just kind of put their head in the sand and like ignore this, but it's getting harder. Taxing jurisdictions are becoming more sophisticated on how they can find if you're doing business in their jurisdiction. And in due diligence, guys, you're going to have to prove out why or why not are you remitting sales and use tax, or maybe in Europe, VAT. So it's going to come up. You can't escape this. So, but now it's getting so much easier. Avalara was that huge gorilla in the market. I used Avalara at one company, but now you've got Anrock, kind of a new player. You've got TaxJar. But again, you see people just not remitting sales tax, and maybe that's true. Maybe based on your assessment of sales tax compliance, you don't need to. Others, like, hey, I'm not even sure. Some people are using spreadsheets, which is like a little bit um, surprising. That would be pretty hard. And then using Zero, but I think Zero uses someone else's white labels their tax remittance, Anrock TaxJar and others. So there are quite a few players here, not as many like as CRM solutions, but it is something, again, this is my correct progression. Okay, what's our ERP? How are we invoicing? How are we doing RevRec? How are we doing metrics? Now, how are we doing sales and use tax compliance? Because this is a must have. And people, investors, everybody's getting more sophisticated with this, and they do expect this. And also, last thing you want, and I've had this, is a call from that state saying, "Hey, Ben, I see you're doing business here." And what scares you is like, how long have you been doing business here? Like that will give you a nightmare. Oh, I've been doing business in that state for 5 years. Okay, well, let's talk about that. So, so I would definitely recommend earlier rather than later. And there, it's getting easy. Like you just integrate this into your ERP software, your accounting software, and it really runs itself.
The kind of stuff that keeps you up at night if you don't do it, but will
Yep.
put you to bed easy if you do implement it. So something equally as complex here, this close management software, something that that can determine whether you have a 14-day close or a 2-day close. What are you seeing here usually, right? There's still a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of NA. People just aren't closing. Maybe they don't need to. What's the general trend here?
Yeah, so I'm surprised how many NA, because if you get to some size, you at least need close. And when we talk close management, is just that process of closing the books. Like
Mm,
what are the steps? Are we starting day -2 of close, then day one, day two, day three? What are those expectations? Who are the roles? Who's doing what? And at least a spreadsheet process, because this is quality control, that we don't forget
sure.
things. We don't forget to recon our deferred revenue, for example. So you're seeing spreadsheets, which definitely, let's start in spreadsheets. But then some of these tools are built for that, like Flowcast, Blackline. I know are built for close management. Flowcast has raised a ton of money. But then you have ERPs like Sage, Campfire, who, hey, in our software, you can manage the close process. So at least use spreadsheets. But again, as you scale, this is a must-have because it gets too complex to know who's doing what in your close.
Sure. And now I'm wondering, Ben, is there any overlap between the close management software world and then the FP&A software world? Just as you're forecasting and closing, right? What is that overlap? How much overlap is there between that Venn diagram?
Well, I think if you think as a CFO, your monthly routine, it's not just accounting, but it's the FP&A process. So, right, I have my monthly calendar of what I'm doing, what my team is doing. So again, we're closing the books. Maybe FP&A is also involved, looking at how expenses are being coded by a department, right? They're helping in that close process a bit for quality control. We close the books, we do our financial reporting, then we run into our FP&A process with variance analysis, forecasting, creating metrics, creating that board deck for the month. And that's our monthly routine. Of course, hopefully that doesn't last 30 days. We get that done, maybe in the first 20 days and everything's done. But yeah, it goes from accounting into FP&A.
Sure. So slight overlap, nevertheless. So before we had a question on Power BI, now we're going to get into that here. This is where we get a little bit more crowded once again. What are your thoughts here, Ben, from maybe the count of tools, the number of tools used, or just the new entrants to this here as well? I could see a couple 1%ers as well.
Yeah, so BI this is a tough one. I kind of BI analytics because this could be in a lot of things. Like you see again, Power BI, Tableau, Looker, Metabase, but then FP&A planning solutions coming into play here, and then you have a Chart Mogul, which is more revenue analytics. So it's kind of a broad category. But again, Power BI, I think I don't remember the changes on this one year over year. But again, Power BI, Tableau, usually those ones that you see at the top. But again, now it's like now FP&A is also a source of doing analytics in those platforms versus trying to
Mm,
use a Power BI. Like I would prefer that in my FP&A solution versus trying to have a Power BI project.
sure. Some sort of integrated, so what we were talking about before, just a BI tool integrated into a system, getting two in one rather than just having to,
Yep.
leverage more tools, the 10 plus we were talking about before.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so now SaaS spend management, the other side of SaaS, right? What do we notice here?
So SaaS spend management. So this is interesting category, and the whole spend management corp cards category is really interesting. But now, right, you have solutions who are focused on helping you manage your internal software tools. Now, I think this category is changing, where some of these solutions started very niche, like, hey, let's just manage your internal software spend, who are now like, well, I think we have to be broader than that. Now let's handle all your spend. So it'll be interesting to see
Mm,
how this changes. But again, Ramp, big player here, one of the top players, Brex, Cloudera. So some of these like Cloudera, Vendor, SpendFlow, Tropic are built for that SaaS spend management, but now probably
sure.
expanding into other categories. So I think this may merge with another category that I tracked as well.
Yeah, I must say, out of any of the sets of tools that we've looked at today, category 9 here, this is the one I've definitely seen the most advertising for, whether it's, on the train, LinkedIn, wherever it is. These are the ones that you definitely hear the most about. So it's definitely an
Yep.
exploding market there. So now sales compensation software, what are we really talking about here? Is it truly just like commissions? What's the breadth of this category?
Yeah, so it's really commission software, variable compensation for our sales teams, maybe marketing teams, or anyone who's on variable comp. Now, maybe not necessarily like executive bonuses, but on those commission type plans, revenue driven type plans. And again, I use spreadsheets, but things become too complex. We have all these, sales reps coming and going and managing that, or different plans change year to year. And we've got legacy plans that we're still tracking because they're getting paid out on a legacy plan. So this is
Mm,
one of those that I think, you may think nice to have, but it's just going to make your life so much easier. Now, Salesforce is up there. I think they acquired a Spiff as part of that. And then QuotaPath came on one of my webinars, capturing exactly some of those top players. And they also help just with sales comp design too. So I think this is another one that you can hook up, say, to your CRM system, feed all that bookings data in there, and they'll calculate it. So I had spreadsheets, and then at one company, we integrated something in Salesforce, and it just
okay.
drove it in there, and it was that engine to calculate it. And again, it just makes it easier for sales, for the sales reps, and for finance.
Awesome. It does bring up another kind of sort of category I've seen being developed, at least what we've seen with Drivetrain. Like our biggest users, FP&A teams. Then, it's a mix between the HR department, but then also RevOps or sales ops, right? How have you seen sort of RevOps or sales ops been developed over time? Because this is a department in and of itself, at least for what I've seen for the most part.
Oh, yeah, RevOps. And I had a great conversation at one of the SaaS dinners I hosted with Ray Reich and talking to CFOs
Mm,
there. And where should RevOps sit? Should it be the CFO? Should it be the CRO? A
mm,
lot of good pros and cons for each. Mostly it sits in sales and with reporting to the VP of sales or CFO, or I'm sorry, CRO. But it's definitely a good debate, and that's changing because there's so much data that's going on in RevOps and data analysis, right? That should be FP&A's strong suit that, they would get involved as well.
right. That's exactly the controversy I've seen with it is, who does it sit under? And then who is in charge of whose metrics, right? Because like you said, typically FP&A teams are going to be dealing with the outputs of the KPIs that the sales team might be working with. They're going to be tracking that very closely, but it's the sales team at the end of the day that are getting these commissions, that are fighting for these. So, who decides the metrics, who decides the numbers? And I've actually seen them starting to work really closely together, such that like maybe the CFO CRO title is sort of becoming like a slash on LinkedIn. I am the CRO slash CFO sort of thing. And so I've seen, a lot of grouping together on each of those items.
Yeah.
So here now, I think it's a good time to transition to the Q&A. We do
Yeah.
have one more poll here, and this will maybe spark some questions, but if you have any, definitely feel free to put them in there. One, did you find this webinar a good use of your time? How valuable was it for you? And then two, would you like to explore a demo of Drivetrain. Answer those as you feel free to in whatever time we have left. But in the meantime as well, any questions jumping out at us, Ben? I don't know if you see any in particular that pique your interest here.
Yeah, so definitely we have a lot of questions coming in. Like Melanie, what are must-have tools for finance? And for me, well, it depends. If we're saying finance, um, yeah, FP&A is a must-have. At some point, your finance team, FP&A team, you need FP&A software. On the accounting side, right, we need go-to-ERP, we need invoicing, we need subscription management, RevRec, sales comp, sales tax. They're some of the core for me. Um, and there's a good someone anonymous CFOs often ask, do I hire or do I buy a solution? Which one of these could you just hire out versus buy a solution? And I think really what we covered today, these are all solutions. Other than sales tax, you can get, say, sales comp study or or tax studies done by an expert and just kind of have them assess and make sure you're doing the right thing if you don't have too much to remit. So that's possible. I just had a RevRec expert on one of my webinars, but again, maybe RevRec experts help you make sure your 606 is set up correctly, but then you need a solution. So I'd say a lot of these
Sure.
are solution based. Um, yeah, so good question. And then there's another anonymous question about they have subscription and usage consumptions. Do we have two kinds of software? And I think we were on the Kirk, the sales comp software side maybe, but
Yep.
yeah, usually sales comp, it'll handle both. Like if you have subscription, if you have usage, because again, comp varies a lot with usage and when comp kicks in for usage based. But usually you don't. Now in invoicing, that, yeah, maybe it depends on how complex usage is, where maybe your ERP can handle invoicing for subscription, but you need a point solution to handle all that metered and usage revenue. That's possible.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, good stuff.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
interested just personally, Ben, have you, if you had to rank the priority of, you have a fixed amount of money to spend on these tools, where are you spending, maybe it's percentage based or however you would think about it, the most money on a type of tool, one of these categories? And where are you spending maybe, chronologically the second and third most? We don't have to go all the way down to the bottom, but maybe your top three, like these are the things that are worth investing in from an organizational perspective.
Yeah, so obviously on the accounting side, you've got to invest in invoicing and RevRec. That's big. And that could be in
Okay.
your ERP, it could be point solutions. But yeah, you got to spend some money there. And I help founders with this, and they go get a quote from a say subscription management invoicing RevRec. Like, boy, yeah, that 20, 30,000, gosh, that sounds like a lot, but it is necessary. It's going to pay off down the road. If you're a recurring revenue business, your RevRec has to be bulletproof. It has to be
Mm,
defensible. So that is good ROI, even if you don't see it up front. So it's gonna be that's where I'm spending a lot of money because that's got to be right. Then sales and use tax compliance, that's really not a huge dollar lift. That could be a couple thousand a month or $1,000 a month. And that should come into play. And then FP&A, you need a decent budget there. And there's a question from Kate, at what point does FP&A software is needed? And I'd say above 10 million, definitely below 5 to 10, kind of use case based. But yeah, if you're scaling fast, and also it depends, like do you have PE owners, VC owners, what are the expectations of the board and the metrics and the forecasting?
hmm
And I see high expectations with all the companies I help under 10, where the board wants a great forecast. They want all the metrics. And then maybe FP&A comes to play there, but usually above 10 is what I
Got
see.
it. So another one that kind of comes to mind is with all these tools, the way you'll typically be sold on them is you're told this will save you X amount of hours. It will relinquish the need, at least for the next year and a half, for you to hire somebody else as an analyst for your team out of college or whatever. And what would you rather pay? 30K for a tool or 110 for an analyst or whatever the case may be. How true do you think this statement is? Have you found it that when you implement a tool, you really feel like the pressure off of you, the sort of the time suck being pulled away? Or, is it a little bit of an exaggeration to say that these tools are relinquishing the need to bring on another head?
Well, in the back office, yeah, we It's a must-have. We have to have tech to scale. There's too much data, too many transactions, too much going on. We can't scale our finance and accounting function without tech. And then we can have a nice balance between hiring and what is technology saving for us. There's a balance there. So it's critical to yeah, use tech in the back office.
God, so you really are seeing that win from a time side. Like it's worth to put in the tools, despite even the ERPs. We're talking about, accounting softwares, invoicing, FP, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Okay.
definitely. Yep.
Now, on the risk of putting you on the spot here, regarding predictions, what do you anticipate happening with this report, right? Obviously, you're going to be releasing these. I don't know if you're changing the cadence at all or if you're going to keep it a similar cadence of release, but, we've seen, some buckets that are much larger than others, more competitors, less competitors, some where they're very heavy Excel, some less so. What do you expect to see, either based on what you've previously seen or just a gut check expectation that you're kind of thinking about?
Uh, I've covered 22 categories and some surprises this year, like accounting, but others, like say cap table software, it's Carta, right? They dominate. Payment
Okay.
processing, Stripe dominates. Some of those are just not going to change in the short term. But I think other categories, there are a lot of players, a lot of things coming in, subscription management, a lot of change there. So definitely out of the 22 categories. You probably still have some where you have a lot of new entrants or just spreadsheets dominate, where the incumbents are just trying to chip away at that spreadsheet dominance and take that away and take
Mm.
more market share, while others are more wide open and it's anyone, it's up for grab who's going to become the market leader.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So aside from my questions here, we got one more here. This is an anonymous question. Are there any tools you recommend for managing slash forecasting cloud costs? So specifically costs on the cloud, and then another, a plus one to that one. It's the biggest item on our P&L. Any software that comes to mind?
Yeah, so good questions. I'm doing a spend management webinar next week with Tropic, which is in that spend management category. Um, and also, if you haven't joined, I don't know if we be able to drop my newsletter link in here, but if you join my newsletter,
Yeah,
I'm always
definitely.
having different webinars, different solutions on who are covering a lot of these areas. But next week, Tropic's coming on. We're going to talk spend management and cloud cost are part of that. But a lot of these solutions who are focused on spend management are now also bringing cloud cost into that because that is kind of a black hole for CFOs and managing that. So solutions are getting better and there are some benchmarks. And I'm working with one solution provider to hopefully have a webinar in the future on cloud costs and cloud benchmarks.
Oh, good. Okay, so news still to come. Now, I'm interested, Ben, there's across of all these software, you obviously have your templates for how you think about the best way to lay out like your SaaS P&L, and we've seen that time and time and again, incredibly helpful. How easy is it to standardize this across systems, right? Like I might have one level of, my chart of accounts in system A, but if I have another entity that's, you say, NetSuite and Sage and then QuickBooks, how easy is it to standardize these? Like, is your methodology leverageable across multiple tools relatively easily, or is there a lot of like sort of rework that needs to be done on them in order to get it in the way that you would typically think about it, even just from a P&L perspective?
Well, even SaaS P&L has to live somewhere, and usually accounting software is horrible at reporting.
Mm,
It's going to make sure your chart of accounts is great, and then my ideal solution is using FP&A software to then create my pixel perfect reports for the board. So
okay,
that's where I'm going to map my P&L and FP&A software. So I'm literally just hitting the refresh button, Shift F9, and my SaaS P&L is updated. So you're probably going to have one spot for that, and where you can remap things and just put it into that nice format because I found, accounting just super hard. For me,
yeah,
usually that my financial reporting lives in the FP&A tool. And even when I was at a public company and we brought in FP&A software, even my, SEC financial reporting team, they didn't report to me, I was in FP&A, but they used FP&A software, to create all those SEC reports. So it's going to live usually in one source.
got it. That makes a lot of sense. Now we have one more here. How is Drivetrain different from Vena? Okay, so Vena is as a spreadsheet-based tool, similar to, you might have heard of like data rails. They're based off of Excel. So if you're a diehard live and breathe Excel person, right? That's kind of where you would sit on those. Whereas Drivetrain, we have our own engine, right? Where an online tool, we would think that the processing power would be a lot stronger than Excel. Obviously, Excel limits you to 1,048,000 rows, right? No limit on a tool like Drivetrain. So those would be a couple of different points there. The other thing to keep in mind is Excel, at the end of the day, it is an incredibly powerful tool. And usually the point where you start at for any new sort of company, or maybe like transaction-based modeling and IPOs, right? Where the model will exist for a purpose and for a point in time. Whereas if you're looking at the longevity of a company, you'll likely push into a tool more like Drivetrain because, right, it is an online tool that's made for longevity, whereas Excel is it's kind of not a purpose-driven tool. It's just a generic tool that happened to also accommodate finance. And so the calculation engine would be the big difference between there, and then just simplicity of use. Obviously, Excel, you've still got your index matches, HLOOKUP, VLOOKUP, offset. Tools likely spend a little bit more time simplifying those so that you don't have to spend as much time, auditing your own model and seeing those pieces. So calculating billions of transactions versus calculating, thousands of transactions, that would be, kind of where you're at. So I'm interested, Ben, any other thoughts here? We're coming to the last 10 minutes or so, 9 minutes or so. When you think about your SaaS tech stack report, is there anything else that you'd want to share with the group that maybe you've seen in this report that others might not have caught? Everyone should definitely go download it, from Ben's website here.
Yeah, and there was a comment from someone, it's gone now, but someone said they just went through a sales process and the evolution of the tools. Matt,
Mm.
what they went through match what kind of I laid out. So really use this tech stack report as your internal product roadmap. If you're a controller, CFO, FP&A, like it's too complex just to kind of, hey, I'll take this solution and I'll take this solution. Like you have to have a plan for how all these will be designed together. And especially the CFOs out there, right? We've got to be at the table just for the overall data structure within the company and
Mm.
influence, the systems and data. So think about the progression, how these tools are going to work together. And that's so important. And tech is changing so fast. There are new players coming in to RevRec and different things in subscription management. So it can't just, I feel like, can't just be like, oh, it's like the old saying, like, no one got fired for, hiring IBM or something, so I think we can't have that thought anymore, that we've got to look at the latest players, even if they're new, and the impact they're having.
Yeah, sure. The world's evolving really quickly. So here I got 3 questions for you, Ben, from the group. What role should RevOps play in commission plan designs and calculations when RevOps sits in sales?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kate. And I think design, probably not unless they have a sales background or, because we think about RevOps, they're really facilitating that whole sales and marketing process and the data and everything that people need to, execute on our pipeline and leads. So, but I think the calculations and the data, yes, because the number of demos set up, the number of meetings, where are we tracking that data, all those conversion points that may trigger a compensation payout. So I think the data RevOps very important. Design maybe not as much.
Fair enough. So here's a good one, and I actually be interested in your answer on this too. What is a benchmark percentage in terms of accounting and finance BI software of your total OpEx? If you were to group those, what percentage of your total OpEx would you expect that to make up? I'm imagining it depends, but is there a general trend you've seen?
No, I mean, getting that specific, I don't know if there are any benchmarks out there, but that's why you do have to look at the tropics of the world, the spend flows who are gathering all that data, who may have that detailed data. Now, it may not exist at that level. Maybe
Mm.
it's finance and accounting in general as a percent of OpEx or percent of revenue. But again, internally, I think you do. I looked at, all right, how much internal use software are we spending as a percent of revenue, and where is that trending? Just like I did for commissions. I think that that's a major line item, and we have to watch that. Otherwise, it does get out of control.
Beautiful. So two more here before it looks like we call it in our last 5 minutes. One is there a tool that can act as an orchestration layer between various other tools in my tech stack like ERP, CRM, HRIS?
You can probably answer that. I'm sure you have your answer that for that, but yeah, usually what I would see is like, I get a lot of demos. I look at a lot of software, and usually that is in the realm of FP&A software, right? That we're
Okay.
hooking up to HR, we're hooking up to financial, we're hooking up to bookings data because we need all that data in FP&A.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, it's better to hear it from you than from me. You're a bit more of an objective voice here. I would second it though. Normally, I see the consolidation of those tools required only because you're wanting to forecast on top of them. There's no point in having all your historicals in one place unless you're going to leverage those historicals to push them out into a forecast. Hence the need to be able to do that, usually in an FP&A software. But you're seeing a lot of those, data warehouses, Snowflake, Azure, and those sorts of things also housing them. Regardless, you should be able to forecast on top of those. And then last one here, we have what can we learn from the proliferation of third-party tools for managing SaaS when NetSuite and QuickBooks all offer solutions that compete with third-party tools? Will Rillet and Campfire be one-stop ERPs with no need to have many of the third-party tools? Big question, hopefully big answer here, Ben.
Well, make sure you download my tech stack report because I asked this question. Do you prefer best of breed point solutions or ERP? And every year it's won out best of breed point solutions. Now, right, easier said than done to actually then when you're making the buying decision, but that's everyone's, at least their preference. So I think, yeah, the Campfires, Rillets now, they want to be your one-stop shop. So especially Rillet for SaaS, they want, they're going to have RevRec, they're going to have invoicing functionality, they're going to, integrate to Anrock, things like that. So they want to be your one-stop shop, but people still will prefer best of breed and hook on that point solution.
Fair enough. Well, those were some really good questions. As I look through this, I just wanted to quickly recap on if there's any interest in seeing Drivetrain. Here you can see a couple of comments from our customers here that have allowed us to share those with you, and then some of our G2 awards here. We are right now the highest rated FP&A tool on G2, and so we would love to show you a bit more. Also, want to share with you a couple of resources here too. We'll post these. You'll have access to these, so definitely keep this open. But we want to show any of these. You can see Ben's the SaaS CFO survey of the tech stack report for 2025. Be sure to download that, and then some simple reads. We do have a full blog that's all things SaaS, all things forecasting, just to help you out a little bit more. So definitely check that out on our website. So, Ben, I'll leave it with you here. Any last resources they should go and check out? Any way they should reach out to you? Questions they should be asking you? What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Well, thanks, guys. I know your time's valuable. Thanks for joining today. And again, my email is ben@thesaascfo.com. So email me anytime, but also make sure you download that tech stack report. You'll get subscribed to my newsletter because I'm always sharing tools, webinars, events, training, formulas, templates, everything for the SaaS finance crowd. My email's right there. So feel free to reach out and then make sure you download that tech stack report.
Definitely. Well, Ben, thanks so much again for coming on. We love learning from you, and we love being able to host these items with you. And so have an awesome day, and stay cool in extremely hot Arizona over there.
This summer. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Take care, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye. Bye.